If you want to know why an app needs JavaScript on the client and can't just do it all on the server, just look at Hey or any other Hotwire app. This is a great demo of a very slow pop-up and bad interaction. And I'm sure DHH is going to have a totally normal reaction to this, like 100% totally normal. Right? Right? I actually made a bingo board of all the things I expect DHH to do when he overreacts, and let's see how many we hit. Calling the content disingenuous. Check. Bringing up no build for some reason. Check. Bringing up his cars for some reason. Check. Bringing up a blog post about how rich he is for some reason that has nothing to do with anything here. Check plus. I don't know why he's like this, but I don't want this to be about DHH because the thing going on here is so much more interesting than his dated weird takes that he loves to preach about. I honestly thought he would be reasonable with this one, like HTMX was. Nothing about the hypermedia-driven approach precludes including this new event UI in the original request and showing it with some scripting. HTMX is not anti-JavaScript. Why can't they just be honest like this in the Rails side? Or, like our friend Taylor Ortwell, a very sizable percentage of new Laravel apps are paired with React or Vue on the front end, linking Inertia.js, which he regularly cites because we love React, Vue, Svelte, and more. And we've created super easy ways for you to pair them with your Laravel backends without losing your mind. Yeah, they understand that having good client experiences is important. And when you're interacting with your application, you shouldn't be blocked on the speed and latency of your network. First, I need to showcase just how bad things are, and not with the artificial, just slow 3G, like they're all saying, like, your internet's fast, right? Speed is a more complex thing, so we'll have to break that down as well. Then I'm going to showcase other technologies that do this better and why. But we're not talking about the Rails backend performance, as embarrassing as it can be at times, because I don't think it matters that much. There are plenty of ways to scale your backend. You can spend more money, you can spin up more servers, you can do lots of things to make your backend faster, but you need the right technologies in order to make your front end faster. And to be clear, I'm not saying you can't do this with Rails. We did it for years at Twitch using Ember.js for the front end and Rails for the back end. What I am saying very, very definitively is that if you don't have some JavaScript in your client, you're not going to have a great time. And I don't just mean like an all-in-one bundle like HTMX or LiveView or Livewire or any of these types of things, certainly not Hotwire. What I mean is application-specific client-side JS. If you're not putting any JavaScript code in custom for your app, you are making your user's experience worse. The amount worse is up for debate and depends a lot on the application, but I want to showcase just how bad it can get when you have an interactive app like Hey. So let's give it a shot. I had a hell of a time signing back up for Hey because I didn't verify my original recovery email, and they seemed to reset my password for me, which makes no sense. I used one password. I had a randomly generated thing. Nothing, no reason to reset it. They knew that my old account existed, but they wouldn't let me reset it. So I just signed back up and had no issues using the same email address I had signed up with before, which I find kind of funny. Seems like a security issue. If somebody doesn't have the ability to get back into their account, someone else can snipe it. To each their own. Oh, look at that. It doesn't know my sign-in state. When I'm here and I click sign in, it goes to what I'm assuming is, an entirely different app.hey.com. Cool. Hey is an email app built by the people who created Rails. And as such, I would like to think it's a good showcase of Rails. I will be honest though, the people who made Next.js have one of the worst Next.js dashboards I've ever used with the Vercel dashboard. So it goes both ways. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that just because they made the framework, it's perfect and everyone else is going to suffer with these problems. But they should be considerate of them at the very, very least. So if I hop over to the calendar, I want to be very clear here. I have no throttling on, no VPN on. I have a gigabit internet connection in San Francisco, basically as ideal as you can get. And we're still going to see a little bit of jank as we move around this application. So I made this test event here. I can drag it over, and then we have to wait where it lags out a bit and then shows where it goes. And this is, again, with a gigabit internet connection. I can hit plus here. And did you see the pause for a second when I had the empty thing that was the wrong size and then expanded to be the right size? Also my favorite here, watch when I open this up. Watch the section here with the today and such. You're going to notice something. Do you see that temporary flicker of the wrong content there? Good old content shift. What? There's this meme that web dev is copying the way things were 10 years ago. Wouldn't it be nice if the people who are building things the same way that they did 10 years ago could learn some lessons from us? The Laravel guys did, or the Elixir guys did, or any of these other communities did. The Rails guys just refuse to acknowledge their way of doing things doesn't work great all of the time. This is just so jank. And this is, again, zero latency, gigabit internet, as close to the data center as you can reasonably get. But I want to be a little more a little more challenging for this. So we're going to hop over to the network tab. We're going to switch to slow 3G, and we're going to run this again. I command shift ard, so we have to load everything. We're waiting. Page is almost unloading. Cool, now the page is loaded. Still loading more content, that's fine. And here we are, we have the page. Let's hit this plus button again now that everything's loaded. Now, I know, DHH said this guy forgot to share in the clip that he artificially throttled his browser to 3G. Yes, he did. And I agree, these throttles aren't the best way to represent bad internet connections. We need to talk about internet speed. Because there's this assumption that internet speed is just the raw throughput, like the amount of megabits or megabytes or whatever you want to say per second. That is not all there is to internet speed. There's effectively two specs when you talk about internet speed. Imagine a pipe. So we have this pipe and we're pushing, water through the pipe. There's two things that determine how much water gets moved. The first thing is what we'll call latency. It's how fast the water is actually moving. So the speed of the water and the amount of movement the water has, that's your latency. So if you're going to a web page, the amount of time it takes for that website to respond is a separate thing from the bandwidth. You can think of the bandwidth more like the width of the pipe. How much data can fit in the pipe? How much can it move? But then latency is how long does it take to go from A to B? These are different things, and it's very important to note that when you're using browser tools like this, there is no way right now to artificially, through the browser, force latency. You can force lower bandwidth constraints by hitting these buttons, but my latency there was exactly the same as it was prior. So how do we fake latency? Because I think it's important to do that, because as I said here, I'm on a really good internet connection in the middle of San Francisco. Maybe we should simulate being somewhere further away. Turns out there's a great way to do this. I have a thing called a VPN. I just have Nord on here. I know. I use Molvod on other things, but this is what I had set up here, so we're going to use it. I'm going to connect to Brisbane, Australia. Okay, according to chat, I can simulate latency. That's a somewhat new thing, and I don't trust it. I don't trust most of the latency and bandwidth throttling stuff you could do in browser because it's all done very weirdly. I want to be clear here, though. I have none of the built-in throttling. We have no throttling selected. I'm just connected to Australia. So let's see how this performs now. I'm command shift Ring so that I wipe everything. Going in 3, 2, 1, now. Waiting. Not too bad, because again, this is just a latency hit. So the data still comes through. There's like the penalty for how long it takes from the first request, but the rest comes in pretty quick after that. So let's play around again. Let's start with my favorite test, the test event. I'm letting go of it now. That was a solid 1.5 seconds. Move back over. Isn't that great? Let's have some more fun. I'm going to move it to Wednesday, then I'm going to move it to Thursday right after, or Friday. Let's see which one it gets persisted. Okay, it persists in the right order, at least. Usually, hopefully. Now we got in a weird state. This is the issue when you have latency like this. You don't actually know if the thing you're trying to do happened or not. Oh, God, that was real bad. I accidentally hit that, and it took forever to come up. So I'm going to Command-Shift-R again so I clear the cache, because uncache is realistic, let's be fair. Let's hit the plus button again. I'm clicking in 3, 2, 1. That was bad. Do you see the flicker still too? It happens like half the time. Oh, and it comes way later. Why don't I start typing before I do that? Okay, I started typing and then it bugged out a whole bunch. That was great. Go back here. If you start typing right when you see the UI, instead of waiting a second, you might trigger other things. That's super cool. That's wonderful. I click that, I start typing. Even though I saw the new event, it's triggering hotkeys. That's horrible experience. So I'm gonna wait. Now I can start typing. Whew, this is so fun. And again, if I move it around, it takes its time to get there. And if I go over to the day view, it's not as bad. Not great, but not as bad. Why is it sending a request on every key press is a question we just got from chat. And that's a great question. That's because that's how it works. So I am sending a message when I make this event. Are you kidding? LOL. Genuinely something special. I actually can't believe it is like this. One of the things DHH tried to push really hard is this idea that other SPA-like things are going to be just as bad, like Google Calendar. That was not my experience at all. So let's give it a shot. Now I have a calendar with nothing in it. So Command-Shift-R-ing now. Remember, no throttling, just the latency of going to Australia. So if you were in Australia, this is like maybe twice as bad as you would expect there because it has to do the round trip back and forth. But if you're anywhere that has latency for any of a billion reasons, this is a realistic thing. So let's hit the create button because that's what they're saying is really slow. Huh, that opened immediately. Let's click event. That took a second, but not even. That took like 200 milliseconds. And now it's right here. And if I make a new event, it's not going to log a whole bunch of things on every key press. But when I hit save, it will post it. Have this nice little saving UI, event saved. Now I have this event and I can drag it around. It still lags a little bit when you first drop it, but only the first time for some reason, which was interesting. Every other drag and drop you do from that point happens instantaneously. If I knew why it did that, I would tell you. But overall, this is like a comically better experience. It's hilarious. And again, to showcase the difference, anyways, thankfully, none of these problems actually matter because according to DHH, it's also fine to make the argument that if you're somewhere in the world without a modern internet connection, you shouldn't use the web at all for calendar or email. But hey, never had a lot of customers in the Amazonian jungle or the Arctic or whatever or wherever else that may be. Really? Really? This is like, you guys know the meme of like JavaScript devs making really slow sites because they all have really expensive MacBooks and really expensive phones? But sadder than OP's original deceitful clip is the SPA stans who appear to buy any tortured argument that the web must run on JSON instead of HTML. Motivated reasoning suspends basic questions like, how would Hey sell anything if it worked like that? All that being said, I totally agree that speed is a feature. We are putting the final touches on a data center outpost for Hey in Amsterdam to speed up the whole thing for all of European customers, for example. That's completely orthogonal to JSON versus HTML though. Okay, let's see what this is like to use in the EU then. I'll quickly switch my VPN over. What's a good European country I can use? France? Now I'm in France. Command-Shift-Ring. No throttling. Taking its time to even start. That's fun. Cool. Now we're in France this time. Drag and drop. Same experience. Add a new event. Not too bad, but still pretty rough. If I close, open, and start typing, it still just does random shit. But if I open, wait, and start typing, still sends all the events, but at least it works. Oh, that was actually really rough. So check this out. I am making a new event. I'm going to press the enter key to submit it. Pressing enter now. You get no response that the enter key press happened. Insane. Actually insane. The first time I pressed it, I didn't think that it worked because I didn't see a response when I pressed it. Press it twice. Let's see what happens. I pressed enter twice this time. It made two. Are you kidding? Are you fucking kidding? Oh my God. How is this serious? Okay. I'm gonna make a lot of this event. Pressing enter as much as I can. Let's see. Only got 2 out that time. Jesus Christ. I need to show Twitch chat right now because yeah. Can I set it to offline and hit enter? Great question. I am offline now. Nothing. At least it goes away faster without the online. And if I move to online again? Nope. One more fun thing I want to point out, though, somebody else pointed this out earlier. We have all this JS. If I filter to only show the JS, we're still loading a decent bit. Like 651K is not no JS. But if I then hit plus here, I go back to the JS. We just loaded a bunch more JavaScript to do this. Like quite a bit more. If I resize it so we can see where these different requests happened, I'll just refresh and do it again. Command-Shift-R to force it to be cleared. God, also just the sheer number of JS files. This is your brain on no build. I'll hit the plus. You see all of the JS it had to load to make this work anyways? Like if you're going to load all this JS to make the input decent, why not just load the extra JS? Like, why do you care so much? It's just kind of insane to me that this is how this would work. So I am far from a local first guy, but I want to give them some credit. So let's talk about locality of your applications. On one side here, we're going to say server driven. And on the other side here, I'm going to say local first. Your needs for all of these things are going to be fundamentally different. Things that fit in the local first section would be stuff like Notion, stuff like VS Code, stuff like Figma, where you would expect the behavior to keep working and be reasonable offline, even if it does have some online functionality. Then there's things that are very server driven, where like if you're not online, you don't really expect it to work, like blogs, like bank websites, like it's a lot of different things you'd want to put server first. I'd say arguably most things. Games is an interesting one. Any video sites like Twitch, YouTube are fair here, where you really want the server to be the driver for it, for the most part. But there are things you want to make work well on the client. The argument I want to make, though, is that most applications live in the range between these two, where there are certain things that you would want to have server-driven, and then other things you'd want to have local first. In fact, basically everything here other than blogs, I would argue, fits under this category, where you'd want things to have server-driven parts and client-driven parts. The issue is that the technologies that became the most popular, the ones that were the most recommended, either lived heavily on this side, like Ruby Rails, where everything was driven by the server, or they lived too heavily on this side, like SPA with React, the Ajax era. Let's take a look quick. Chris McCord's a legend, and I dearly love him and all of the work he does. So he'll probably put this better than I could.
But I talked about this at ElixirConf last year, because I think a lot of us, we take on a lot of the client-side single-page app complexity out of good business reasons, but we end up adopting a lot more complexity than we had originally planned. Because I think if we're actually honest with ourselves, at least my experience as a consultant working on dozens of applications in a bunch of different domains, I've never had a single app that actually justified a full client-side application solution, right? Like I've never had to write Google Docs in the browser. If I had to, I would absolutely reach for a client-side framework, but there's always been just parts of the app that have needed this kind of rich interactive experience. So I think a lot of us are using single-page app frameworks for good reasons, because we need those bits of interaction. And usually, if we have to go all in and buy into a framework because we need to accomplish these interactive business requirements, then we have no choice but to buy into the complexity.
Agree with everything other than the complexity part. Like single page apps can very much be less complex. They have costs, but the costs aren't necessarily like this is so much more complex and hard to work with. A lot of the things we use with single page app tech are less complex. And then other things on the server side can be more complex too. These things are not as simple as that suggests, but everything else here, I totally agree. This is a spectrum. And I also want to be clear, just because I'm about to draw these different technologies in different places in the spectrum doesn't mean you can't use them for other things, or even that you can't make good experiences using them for other things. It just means it's a good bit harder, and we need to acknowledge that. Let's try to show what I mean here by doing like spectrums. So as a simple, agreeable example of a local first SPA type technology, I'm going to put Angular here. Hopefully no one's going to get mad about that, right? If only the Angular community would embrace server-side stuff and not just poor Brandon Roberts doing it himself. Anyways, so Angular is a technology that works well in the local side. But as you go more and more server-driven, Angular's not going to help you out. And on the other side, we got something like Rails, which is very much server-driven. There are technologies like Hotwire that let you have more client behaviors like navigations that suck a little bit less. So I could put underneath here Rails plus Hotwire. Thankfully, even though that doesn't fit there anymore, it doesn't matter because we're actually going to extend the box. Something like Hotwire lets us go further and further into the territory of the things we were talking about prior. So if you want to have a little bit more interactivity, if you're like interactivity target, which is a hard thing to define, but if the amount of interactivity you want comfortably fits like to here, Rails is a great solution as long as you have something like Hotwire for it. But as you get more and more interactive, this solution starts to break down. And the further you go in this direction, the more pain you're going to feel. The same way if you try to like do something that's really server driven, like a blog in Angular, if you go too far this way using Angular, you're in for a bad time. If you go too far that way using Rails and Hotwire, you're in for a bad time too. We could also put something like Laravel in here. Let's make this green. Sound like a good color for PHP? Hopefully. So you take something like Laravel here, and you could use Laravel plus, it's not LiveView, it's LiveWire, right? Is their equivalent of Hotwire and LiveView? Where Laravel plus LiveWire might go a bit further But they have a better solution here too. Laravel plus inertia. People always saying Livewire is further than Hotwire. That's fair. But I wanted to highlight inertia because inertia goes very far. Because inertia lets you bring in things like React or Angular or Vue or other solutions because Laravel recognizes there's a line somewhere where we can't provide the best client experience anymore. So what if we build good integrations with other things that handle this side better? What if we create a bridge between these? Another way to think of this is not that Laravel plus inertia goes that far. It's that it's a bridge between things like React or Angular. So if I put React down here, what Laravel and inertia effectively allow is for you to create a bridge between the two that is a really convenient experience that kind of gives you the best of both. And if you want server-side focused developer experience, but a good client experience as well in these more client-heavy things, cool. These solutions exist now. I'm bringing up React here for a reason because previously React very much was in the same space as Angular. But now that we have server components, we're stretching really far the other way now too. React plus RSC allows us to do much more server-driven stuff, which is huge. But if you want to just have static pages or the dumbest possible endpoints, server components are not going to get you there because they defy a lot of the ways these things work in our heads and how they've worked over time. We recognize in the React community that there's good things from the server side. The Laravel community recognizes there's good things from the React side. There's other technologies too, like HTMX, which I find really interesting because HTMX effectively lets you build one of these bridges to itself, where you put HTMX as the layer on top of something else. Like you could put like Go here, you could put Rust here, you could put even Laravel here, and then use HTMX as the layer to make this more interactive. You'll never get as far as like React does, but if your goal isn't to be all the way here, rather your goal is to be like here, HTMX might be enough to get you to where your goals are, which means you don't have to adopt client-side JavaScript frameworks at all. And if it turns out you actually only need to be here, but you have like one single feature, like just one thing you need that's over here, even though the rest of your application exists in this area, you can pull in another React or JavaScript-y framework, or you can just write some manual JavaScript or hyperscript. I know that's what the HTMX guys like. There yourself. They actually have a whole blog post about this that I might make a dedicated video about because I think it's really cool. It's part of their set of chapters, whatever you want to call it. What is this called? The hypermedia.systems. And they have a chapter on client-side scripting. REST allows client functionality to be extended by downloading and executing code in the form of applets or scripts. This simplifies clients by reducing the number of features required to be pre-implemented. A common criticism of the web is that it's being misused. There's a narrative that www was created as a delivery system for documents and only came to be used for applications by way of accident or bizarre circumstances. However, the concept of hypermedia challenges the split of documents and applications fundamentally. Hypermedia systems like HyperChat, which precede the web, featured rich capabilities for active and interactive experiences, including scripting. Yeah, if you think this is good, let me know in the comments so I can make a whole video dedicated to it because I think this is a great post. And again, the HTMX guys are on the right side of this, even though our tech couldn't be more different and we're not shipping the same stuff at all. It's weird to me that people think Rails and HTMX are on the same side because Rails is stubbornly trying to convince us that everything from this point forward is dumb and shouldn't exist. That is the Rails opinion. I shouldn't say that's the Rails opinion because there are good people in the Rails community that are just using it for APIs. But when you are blocking this whole side of the application world because you think you're right and you think we're all doing something stupid because you hate the idea of building your JavaScript code so much, it's kind of insane to me. Again, if you're okay with your experience for people who aren't right next to your servers looking like this, looking like test event, pressing enter 3 times and getting a pile of new events added. If that's within your expectations for what your experience should be like, awesome. But if you're expecting more for your users or your users are expecting more from you, you need to do some client-side JavaScript, period. The solutions of the future aren't the ones that say, we're going to live here, figure out the other stuff yourself. And that's more what Angular does, or what Rails, specifically DHH, does, which says everyone on the other side is coping and wrong. This is the only reasonable way to build at scale. People who are on either one of these sides are wrong. The people who are building bridges between them, things like inertia, things like server components, things like HTMX, these are the winners of the future. The winners aren't the ones who can't stop saying the other side is never going to make anything of value. The winners are the ones who look at what the other side is doing, get excited about it, and use it as a way to elevate their own side and their own stuff too. Apple copied the idea of React components with Swift UI. Laravel copied the idea of Live View with Livewire. These are good things. That is awesome. The whole ecosystem gets to move as these ideas are discovered and these experiences are created, and the bar for what a good experience is continues to go up. The reality is that a website like Hey, if you could somehow send this back 10 years, would seem really, really cool. But the bar for a good experience on the web now is significantly higher, like significantly higher. And that's the issue I have. If this was like a Trello or Kanban board, this would suck. If this was an email client, which it is, it kind of sucks. How many requests are we sending? Cool. Not that many. I pressed Command plus twice. Let's check the sent to see if I sent that twice. How do I even get to my sent in here? Is it in here? Sent. Where are my sent messages? I just sent a message. Okay, it only sent once. So they are debouncing some things. What just happened there? That was like, I didn't click anything. That just did a navigation. Okay, so I'm going to showcase Superhuman, which is an email app that sucks a lot less. They actually require you to have a Chrome extension because they want it to be such a good experience in the browser. And I will say, I'm going to have to show this off in a second. The loading times suck because the first time it loads, it has to load a bunch of stuff. So here is my email inbox. This is using an awesome app called Superhuman. Superhuman is a web-based email. I'm in the browser. You can see here, mail.superhuman.com. The thing that is interesting here is that it is using a combination of a Chrome extension and a ton of stuff locally in order to make sure I can do things even when I'm offline. So I'm going to prove that by going offline. Network, go offline. Now I'm going to open up this email. Even though I'm offline, I can still open the email. I can close it. I can navigate to other emails. I can go to another one here. And all of this is working. I can even archive emails. But it says here on the bottom, good news, Superhuman works offline. Messages will be sent and received when next online. Let's prove it. I'll go to slow 3G. It's pinging. It's realizing it can do things now. Now it's starting to do those things. I do a lot of email nowadays. I do a lot of email on planes too. Superhuman means I can actually get a bunch of email done on a plane. That is dope. That is awesome. Most things don't need this type of local experience. I agree. But email in particular, I have found to be one of the best options for a product that benefits a lot from having a good local experience. It's awesome. It's become an essential part of my workflow. And even though they cost like, what, $30 a month, I would never even think about doing email without Superhuman anymore. And this is just one of the reasons why. Their ability to charge a premium is because they have a premium experience. And their premium experience exists because they went all in on good client-side stuff. By not ignoring client-side, they made something awesome. And it is actually hilarious to me that anybody would think email is an app that is totally fine to require a low latency gigabit connection. And I'm not a big local first guy. I generally think local first is overblown, but it's insane to me that anyone would think this isn't a good thing. I'm curious what this take is. And it was sent by Ryan and tweeted by Ryan, so it has to be good.
If someone was going to build an app like that with Laravel, they would definitely choose inertia every time. Like they would never try to do it with PHP or even with Livewire. I think if you're going to try to build something like as high fidelity as something like a linear or a good.
I can't do anything about the volume, guys. Blame Dax and crew for keeping things too quiet. There's nothing I can do about that. But I'll summarize the take. It's if you were going to build an app like that, I don't know what they're referencing, nobody in the Laravel community would do that without inertia. Like if you need something interactive, you're building something that is heavily interactive, obviously they're going to reach for the technology that makes more sense there. And honestly, that take and the general way that the Laravel guys have been positioning themselves is making me pretty hyped. Oh, they're actually talking about Hey Calendar. That's even funnier. Thanks for the context there. Like the thought of doing something like this without good client-side experience is just kind of insane to me. And it feels rich coming from the people who said running JavaScript on the server is stupid to say that running JavaScript on the client is stupid. Like, if you hate the language, just say that. And obviously the person who forced CoffeeScript on their entire ecosystem is not a big fan of JavaScript. Cool. That'll make sense. I'm just annoyed. I have not covered this part yet. This is also a good point that Egoist made. Love this dude. Every time you click a day in Hey Calendar, it makes some API call to fetch 2,000 lines of HTML, and then it spends 2 seconds in clone node to update the calendar. Like, if you hate JavaScript, why are you running JavaScript much more than almost any other application? I will say that running profiling does throttle. You get way worse performance when you're running a profile than when you're not, but that's still insane. Their argument's always been shipping JavaScript is too heavy, but they're shipping more JavaScript files, and those JavaScript files take more to run and require bigger payloads on every side. It's the worst use case of the hypermedia thing. Absolutely. And I would hope that like the HTMX guys would come out and say, yeah, if you're building this, do more of the work on the client side. Like we don't need this to be on the server side, because more and more of the community is starting to realize these things. The same way that React realized we need to be more on the server side, Laravel realized we need ways to get better experience on the client side. Embed tweeted comparing Notion Calendar, which is actually very slow, and just loading with just VPN, no throttling. This is a comparison of load times on what I would consider a slow calendar, which is the Notion calendar, against the Hey calendar. Just VPN, no additional throttling, just additional latency. Notion one's pretty slow. We're still waiting on the Hey one. That's insane. Wasn't the whole point that by doing it server first, we can get that first paint faster? Because I'm not seeing that at all here. I'm actually seeing quite the opposite of this here.
Or just in your own mind.
I would like to believe if I could get DHH to try inertia, he would just delete Hotwire. That's what I would like to believe. Because I think, I do think like it's holding Rails back. And I loved DHH is my hero, and I hate to say it pains me to say this, but it's holding Rails back. And you can Hey calendar is the perfect example of how and like why it's holding Rails back.
Taylor, are we best friends now? Because I think we're best friends now. That was beautiful. That was better than I could ever put it. Another great one from Dax, which, as you guys know, Dax and I do not always agree on what is best here. We like very different things, but we still ended up on the same side here because people are choosing the way they like to develop over the way the users are going to use the thing. In the words of Dax, I hate JS. I continue to write a ton of it because it's how you deliver high quality apps. You can escape it for some products, but never for productivity apps. Yep. I got nothing else to say here. This was a fun one. I appreciate everyone from all of these communities that aren't DHH, even people within the Rails community, for coming out and saying, yeah, client-side JavaScript does make a lot of sense, and using Hey right now does kind of suck. I totally agree with Taylor. I even agree with Dax. I think we should embrace client-side JS where it makes sense. How much we should embrace, how we should do it, what frameworks we should use, all of that. Those are fun ways to bicker and fun conversations to have. But which framework you choose is a different conversation from if you should have client-side JS at all. And the people who say one of these sides is always wrong, that's the only bad take you can have here. As long as you embrace the value of the other side, you're going to come out on top eventually. But if you pretend the other side is always wrong and that the way they build can never work, you're just going to make worse things. So until next time, go try out Live View. Maybe, just maybe, play with inertia or server components too. Peace, nerds.